Thank you for the invitation for us to participate today. We're going to just take a few minutes here today to explain a bit about our tiny nonprofit that we work for and dig into some of the area topics around water and tailings that really are part of the whole bigger picture we need to look at. Um, when we were invited, we looked at the theme of this event, the theme of finding certainty in an era of change. Um, is so important, but from a Sikh perspective, and I was reflecting on it, actually, the word change may be the wrong one for us right now. It's constraint. Constraint is the big issue that we're looking at, and how do it's a nowhere are these constraints sharper than in water and tailings. There's more pressure, there's more scrutiny, there's slower moving technology. Every site is different from the last. The fact that the diverse geologies and geographies and climate globally create such different challenges for water management, water stewardship, and our operational relationship with water, really, um, and its role with the regional communities. So, how do we as an industry move forward on these topics together and make real change and find certainty in what we're doing with our inner operations? And that's where our group is focusing. Um, I believe there's already been a few presentations talking to these topics around water this week, and I will be going to look at them later. I was excited to hear about it. Um, but when it really makes sense that you're going to have multiple discussions on water in an event like this because it's such a critical priority. So I hope we're not too redundant, but really the intention of CEEC is as a nonprofit, we're a global nonprofit dedicated to advancing eco-efficiency in minerals production. Um, what that means is everything we do is open. We're about amassing knowledge, enabling collaboration, and addressing challenges together for the industry, uh, with the intention of trying to advance our performance and better our performance right across around the world. Um, we have the Global Water Initiative within our program, which really takes a five-stream approach. That's what you're seeing on the screen right now. And that's through the GWI, we bring together technical experts, communities, and leaders aiming to make knowledge accessible so that decision makers and technology people can use it. Laurie, who's with me, leads a lot of CEEC's water and tailings work within our groups, and with his own practice is also really globally recognized as an expert in these spaces. So we're pretty lucky to have him. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to ask Laurie a few questions, really try to pick his brain on these topics, and then we'll be open for any questions from others. So before we move on, Laurie, I was just wondering, do you have any other comments you'd make on the water wheel itself that we're looking at?
Yeah, thanks, Heather. So the water wheel, I guess, was a concept that we came up with as we were exploring what areas to focus on, etc. So Seek really started as a group of process engineers. We have a very metallurgy focus, etc. But getting into water, we realized it's much broader than just what type of flotation process or leaching process, etc. It needs to incorporate other aspects, and so in our more multidisciplinary engagement with people, we came up with these four segments that you see. So some of them focus on technology and innovation, water treatment and management, but also environmental aspects around environmental responsibility, as well as social consideration, stakeholder engagement, and all of that linked by interdisciplinary collaboration. I think Melody sort of spoke to this topic a little bit of social considerations in her talk, and that was very important. And I think that's been a really useful segment just to make sure we are looking at the water context holistically, and we're not just focused only on technical solutions. Yeah, that's probably my piece on the water wheel.
Thanks, Laurie. I'm going to stop sharing just so people can see our mugs more closely.
Sure.
Um, Okay, so I have a few questions for you, Laurie. So hold on to your seat. We're
Yep.
going to get going. My first one was really from where you are sitting. What's the gap
Yep.
that you think matters the most in water and tailings right now? It's really between what's technically possible and what's actually being deployed. And is it really closing or is
Yes.
it?
So tailings and water, as you said, are really key challenges for the industry, and I would say things are getting harder. The reason being that you hear on forums like this, we have declining ore grades, so you have to treat more ore to produce the same amount of metal, and in conjunction with that, demand is rising. So if you think about the amount of wastes that are coming out of the mining sector, whether it be waste rock or tailings, the ground up products from processing that need to be stored, those are rising in terms of the bottom line quantities. And then water use is often linked to tailings production. So if we think about tailings, so they're like sand, silty type of materials, etc. The big three are really copper, gold, and iron ore. And the demand of all of those three is continuing to rise. So I would say that things are getting harder. So we've got to work faster. We've got to work harder just to keep up. And then we've got to be thinking about how we can reduce impacts. And some of the tailings facilities around the world are now in the billions of tons. So these are very large landforms that often contain a lot of water, and sometimes they fail and they kill people and they damage environments and so forth. So things are actually getting harder, I think. But in conjunction with that, I think the mining industry has been moving both on capital investment in certain known technologies, as well as doing some research, development, and implementation of newer technologies to, if you like, reduce the intensity or make tailings more benign, give ourselves more chance of creating landforms that are more manageable at closure and so forth. So on the waterfront, we've seen a lot of that in Chile, for example, with the desalination and pumping of water from the sea rather than using fossil groundwater uses and so forth. So that reduces water stress, but at a very high cost. But I think has allowed the copper industry in particular to expand its production without getting into major conflicts around water. On the tailings front, we're seeing a lot of movement around a movement towards coarser processing. And there's a couple of aspects of that. One is what we call coarse particle flotation. We do some of that investigation in the Global Water Initiative. So technologies like, for example, Aries Hydrofloat. There's also the Jordan Novacell. Those are technologies that should allow mineral recovery to be maintained at much coarser sizes, so that then the waste we produce are more easily dewatered, that they're more easily managed, etc. So I think there's good things happening in that area. But the big thing really in the copper sector in particular is a movement towards heap leaching of a broader range of ores. So when Sarah gave her talk this morning, understanding mineralogy, etc., the mineralogy of an ore relates to the types of flow sheets we can use, and hence the wastes that are produced. We'll come back to that a little bit more in the talk. But for many decades, the copper industry has been trying to do heap leaching of coarser rocks, if you like, creating big stacks of ore that are more drainable, that we can leach, for example, with acid to extract copper. That sort of process has a much lower water footprint and also leaves behind more stable residues. So I think watch this space. That will be a significant shift and will help really sort of catch up with that trend of lower grade ores and so forth. So reducing intensity, both in the energy and water space, and better landforms.
Great, thank you. It's a lot. I find it such an interesting getting into this side of the industry. It's so complex. It's if you like to be challenged, it's the place to be working. Tell me, Laurie, when it comes to all of this, could you think of a water or a tailings project where real innovation is actually stuck? There's so many worries about the risks and worries if things will move forward. Do we have good examples yet? And if not, what killed it?
Yeah, okay. So I'll talk about a water project. And when we say innovation, I think sometimes we think about innovation like some technical gadget or something that's invented in a like a little university laboratory somewhere. But I also think innovations around how we work together to solve complex problems in different ways. So the example that I come back to on water is a project in Peru. And I think Aileen has a link to a report that I'll speak to. So this is a water a wastewater plant that was built in Arequipa in Peru in conjunction with the expansion of the Cerro Verde mine. And so Cerro Verde, very, very large copper mine. And they were trying to secure water. Their choices were all expensive and not good. But in that community at that time, around the early 2010s, a lot of polluted water was going into the local river, the Chile River. And what the mining company realized is that rather than just them thinking about their um, boundaries in the project itself, they really needed to engage with a broader range of stakeholders, community interests, farmers, etc., and think about how to solve other bigger water issues in conjunction with securing supply. So they invested many hundreds of millions of dollars in the end in a large water treatment plant that took sewage and other wastewaters, cleaned up that water, produced better quality water downstream, and then took some of that treated water for the mine expansion. And overall, I think that's been a very, very good project. It still withdraws some water from the system, though, right? So not everyone's happy. And there are some trade-offs and compensations, but ultimately a much, much better solution than perhaps trying to force their way to access water and create a conflict. Or alternatively, the other alternative would have been desalination and pumping from the ocean. So I think that's innovation in the sense of how a mining company worked together with a much broader range of people to think beyond perhaps what you would normally narrowly look at. And I think that's an area that's really important. We need to be doing more of that.
Okay, thank you. The next thing I was thinking about is around risk. Mining as an
Yeah.
industry, we're famously cautious. We so proudly say we want to be first to be second. It's a little annoying.
Yes.
And in water and tailings, consequences are big if we get it wrong. They're
Yep.
severe. So caution's rational. So in your view, where's the line between healthy risk aversion on one side and a caution that could actually make the industry less safe over time?
Yeah. Look, I think I agree with you that the mining industry is typically quite cautious. I think there have been some mining companies that have invested in the long term in developing newer technologies. I started my career with Mount Isa Mines, which at that time was quite an innovative company, both in mining, underground mining technology, in mineral processing, and in smelting, etc. But these things do take time. They take some commitment. It's not the sort of thing you often just buy off the shelf, right? So but I think the key to advancing certain technologies and implementing them successfully, a lot of that comes down to collaboration. So collaboration with researchers, developing the right people who I think in the mining space you need applied researchers. So yes, there's a place for fundamental research, but you're really talking about applied research and how that can be developed and can be robust and so forth and tested. But staying open to possibilities and thinking about how to share the risk. So I think where mining companies have been prepared to work more in an open source type of manner, if you like. And I know that's a theme of CEEC. We like to do things open source because that way I think you give more room for all those possibilities and potential obstacles and challenges to be discussed and managed. And I think the risks in mining are too big for mining companies to try and go this alone. So I think that's very important. And to recognize that when a major technology shift occurs, so you see this, for example, we've seen it in the nickel industry some years ago with a shift towards high pressure acid leach type of technologies. The investments are huge, and sometimes things don't go well because perhaps companies didn't do the necessary homework around understanding the full system risks, perhaps because engineering companies were a little too optimistic, or they were maybe, how do I say, encouraged to be a bit too optimistic in some projections. So I think being honest and being open-eyed, being collaborative, I think that's all important. We have seen examples, I think, where certain technologies have been quite successful. It's always underpinned by competent people who work together, in my opinion.
You are probably not for the first time being accused of being diplomatic, Laurie, right now in the chat. So I'm sure you've heard that. All right, thanks for that. I have two more questions for you. So to start
Gavin Mudd, of course, it's Gavin Mudd. Yeah, no, Gavin's correct. I'm being somewhat diplomatic. Yeah, I could be a bit harsher.
Awesome. So, I mean, okay, the reality is every site is different, different geology, climate, water balance, tailings,
Yep.
chemistry, etc. But how do you reconcile that with the fact that we need solutions that scale across industry? So, is there pattern matching from one site to another that works, or is it just gonna fall apart?
So Heather, I want to sort of talk to a concept we've done in the GWI, which is around certain archetypes in mining. So we focus particularly on flow sheet archetypes, and this theme around linking the geology of an ore deposit with the flow sheet archetypes that are currently sort of known and work, and potential future directions. So, for example, when Sarah was giving her talk about some of the mineralogy in copper deposits, we have certain sulfide minerals that are in the what we call the hypogene sections of the deposit, those that have not been weathered. Things like chalcopyrite, for example, the main copper bearing mineral, copper iron sulfide. And so the main technology we use there is flotation, as opposed to the surface layers which have been weathered, where there are various oxide minerals that are leached. So understanding how the geology of a deposit links to the potential flow sheet choices, and then linking that also with geography. So geographical factors, things like the proximity of the mine site to water sources, the topography which might affect where you can put certain wastes like tailings and waste rock, proximity to infrastructure communities, those type of things. So there certainly are patterns. I think when we come to the archetypes concept, we picked four commodities, so copper, gold, iron ore, and nickel. We've kind of done a matrix of the different types of flow sheet options, and then what are the big drivers, and then how can we potentially think about technology choices or flow sheet configurations and so forth, to both make money and be economically viable, as well as understanding the waste and water related issues that come. So we know that geology, for example, ultimately affects the characteristics of wastes and what are the water pollution related challenges, what are the quantities and so forth. So certainly I think there are patterns, but on the other hand, every ore deposit is unique. And so there is some devil in the detail, if you like. And we still need to do the homework in terms of would certain solutions work in a particular context and so forth. And a good example of that is acid rock drainage risks in wet climates. So for certain copper deposits, certain gold deposits, etc., we have pyrite that ends up in the tailings and waste rock. And in a wet climate, for example, that's a huge risk in terms of polluting water. So I think we're trying to explore that area as CEEC, and we put that out there to a few parties, and I think they like the concept,
Mm.
because we don't want to sort of be too, how do I say it? If you look at everything as being unique, then it's a lot of work, right? We do want to discover the patterns.
Absolutely. I think that would be really helpful. Just creating those common knowledge, common language across industry really helps.
Absolutely, yeah. Yep.
I have one last question, and then Sarah will can just when Laurie wraps up, we can hand it back to you because I'm worried about time as we go here. I can talk to Laurie all day. I just find I always learn so much. So my last question was really, Laurie, you've told me, we've talked before about how the industry is really fragmented. You were just speaking to it a bit.
Yes, yep,
We need to
yep,
pool effort on priority problems. Especially in areas like water, like tailings, energy, any of
yep.
these sort of areas, we should all be working together. It shouldn't be a competitive advantage. So do you have any insight in what that actually looks like in practice and where you've seen it work?
Yeah, look, I think a couple of examples. Recently, BHP and Rio Tinto, two of the largest mining companies in the world, have worked together on a document around filtered tailings. So it's called Filtered Stack Tailings Guide for Study Managers. I'll pop the link into the chat for Eileen later on to circulate. But that's an example where mining companies who are competitors have come together, pooled resources. They've worked with uh, leading industry consultants and with Colorado State University, put together this document, which I think is very good. It's open source, provides really good information to make sound decisions around that particular technology choice, which would significantly reduce water consumption in a lot of mining types of projects. And another example is Professor Leslie Warren, who we met recently in Toronto and we saw last week at the Global Water Summit. She's a really, really good collaborator, and she's been doing work around biological type of systems and the role of bacteria in interactions with mine waste. And she's pulled together an industry consortium and has really accelerated and got people working together to understand that particular topic area. So great collaborators, I think, are key, and companies that are willing to be open and share information, because these problems are bigger than they can solve themselves.
Perfect. Thank you. Sarah, over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, both of you, for such a fabulous discussion. I think it was really interesting to really hear your insights into water. So both Laurie, from your perspective, but also the way you're asking the questions, Heather, because I think I think it's so important for us to understand, water doesn't belong to one company or something
Mm.
like that. And so how do we make best use of it as its entirety? So a massive round of applause to both of you. Thank you so much for coming along today, and awesome for all of the links that are in the chat. We're going to take a proper look at them. Thank you very much. Round of applause. Brilliant.